Yo, what is up, YouTube? Today we're going to be talking about spiritual partnerships, and we got Sophie, my girlfriend, on with us today. And yeah, we're going to be hopefully helping you find or improve your current relationship, or find, an ideal relationship, and sort of go through the different learnings and process that we sort of use our relationship as a vehicle for our personal growth. And yeah, we're just going to sort of jump into it. So it made sense to sort of go through this sort of chronologically in like terms of our learnings. And so first off, I'll give Sophie a chance to speak in a minute, but first off, it was very much like we were both in our own sort of self-improvement, self-transformation journeys. We were prioritizing our own selves, and I personally wasn't looking for a relationship. And that's often when you're in the correct place, when I use the word like healthy. I was doing my own thing, I was ambitious, I was striving, I was sort of like in my masculine, if you will.
You were your number one priority
Exactly.
at the time, and you weren't looking for anything, and you went in like a seeking state of mind.
Yeah, what was your situation? What were you prioritizing at the time?
The same. Also in a growth cycle of life, and like prioritizing myself, growing myself, focusing on like how I can be the best version of myself, and not trying to like fill any holes with anything outside of me. And I wasn't actively seeking something to make me feel whole. I was focusing on like how can I make myself feel fulfilled and whole and happy and peaceful on my own.
Yeah, that's a good point, because if you go into a relationship lacking something, you end up trying to fill the void with the relationship, and that's a codependent relationship. It's not a positive sum. It's almost like you're sucking each other of energy. You're sucking each other dry. It's you're trying to like drain love out of the relationship rather than just overflowing with it naturally.
It becomes kind of transactional, like there's something you're looking for from them.
Yeah, and you see that in lots of relationships, and that's how a lot of relationships are structured. But if you go into the intention of, I'm going to work on myself, and I don't want to have these sort of baggage type terms come across, but you don't want to have things that are going to detract from a relationship or almost be toxic in a relationship. You have to work through those things sort of prior to.
Yeah.
And when you do, you naturally sort of attract someone, you naturally sort of fall into a positive sum relationship or a spiritual partnership, which is actually a book Sophie's read. We sort of talked a lot about it, but it's that idea that you're in it together, you're sort of a team, you're not one-on-one transactional. It's very different to how a normal relationship is structured. Can you touch on that?
You're like completely adding to each other's lives, but not from a like transactional place, from a your whole beings coming together mesh well, in a sense that like you have different strengths and weaknesses which balance well with each other's, and therefore you improve each other's lives, but just by being yourselves, not by like actively trying to do something for them or them actively trying to do something for you. You're like individual beings naturally help each other and naturally like improve each other's lives. And the spiritual partnership is definitely like a different paradigm of partnership than like a traditional relationship. It's more like a soul on soul relationship is what we kind of mentioned it as. It's like your egos that everyone has, but they're not like involved in the relationship as much, and like you're aware of each other's egos and you can see them, but you're not like reacting to each other's egos in a way.
Yeah. My favorite model for this is you view the relationship as something that almost accelerates your growth. It gives you opportunities to grow. I think someone actually in some book I've read on this similar sort of concept is that a relationship is actually almost the best thing at triggering you. And so you end up spending so much time with someone that it's actually the best place to be disturbed, to be triggered, to work through all these things that are in some way disturbing you, and you sort of get to the root of those disturbances a lot quicker, and it sort of accelerates your growth if you're mindful of those opportunities that are coming up.
And you take them as opportunities.
Yeah, for sure.
Like sheds light on things that, because you're just in close proximity to another person, other people and your relationships with them mirror things within yourself that you have to work on.
Yeah.
So it's like you're constantly living with a mirror that like they might do something that disturbs you, but that's actually just something within yourself that's being disturbed, and then it like gives you an opportunity to face all those things within you, which if you're by yourself you may not have like had the same clarity and light shed on those things.
Yeah.
So yeah, using opportunities where like, okay, maybe something bothers you, but realistically that's an opportunity for you to look within you and be like, okay, why is it that I'm getting bothered by this? Not why is it that they are bothering me, kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. So before we go on to you mentioned ego, soul thing, I want to talk about the masculine, feminine poles, and how that also has a play in that if you're like in touch with your feminine or masculine, that's a natural attractor, and often the most masculine will attract the most feminine. And if you're somewhat neutral, or maybe you haven't really sort of got in touch with your essence, your masculine or feminine essence, then you may not attract the ideal mate that you're looking for, or perhaps you haven't like healed your own relationship with your own masculine, feminine. I think Carl Jung talks about that animus sort of parts of the ego, but getting in touch with that is a super part of becoming like a healthy and well-rounded individual. And I often feel myself when I'm working on that and I'm sort of in that masculine sort of, maybe I'm going out into the world, I'm trying to do my best, I'm really focused on my work, then my relationships, particularly feminine relationships, end up thriving. My relationship with you ends up being better. You get to relax into your feminine a lot more. And so in a way, when I'm more masculine, it helps the feminine around me and sort of attracts the feminine around me. So.
And sometimes I'd say from a feminine perspective, it's easy as a woman because women are looking for like strong men to lead them and to make them feel loved and like protected and provided for. And it's easy, like that's a natural feminine urge, I think, if you're a feminine woman, to seek that. But if you're not like outwardly expressing your feminine energy, really hard to attract that type of masculine energy you're looking for. And it's easy to like fill that masculine hole within yourself and like try and like be that boss bitch type of archetype and like be very independent. And like there's a time and a place for independence, but if you're looking to attract a masculine mate, you have to be aware of like the feminine energy that you're putting off or potentially lack of. Like it's like a magnet, isn't it? Like the two opposite poles attract.
Yeah, it's important what you mentioned. Like these things aren't like one and done. These are often like a journey, and you're often like cultivating a level, and you may go through seasons of maybe falling out of it, maybe becoming a bit more neutral in your sort of polarity, if you will. And you sometimes have to get back in touch with that, really like sort of invest in that concept, and it ends up making your relationships way more healthier, and it's something that's really important.
It's more of like an ongoing ratio. Like no one's 100% feminine or 100% masculine, and there's a time and a place for everyone to tap into different energies. But if in that relationship, I think holding those poles definitely increases the polarity and attraction.
It's important to note that not every man is like totally like say 100% masculine, or some men are like actually have quite a feminine essence, quite rare, if you will. But some relationships are even more like less extreme. They're only slightly polarized, and that's also like a healthy and balanced relationship. If you want more information on this, I recommend The Way of the Superior Man. It's a great book on this whole concept of masculinity and femininity and how this sort of plays out in the world, and how to be your best self as a man, but also show up for the feminine energy.
Maybe
how it wants that.
For women, by the same guy, I can't remember his name, the Intimate Communion book is probably
David Dida.
Yeah, it's a good book for women as well.
So going back to the paradigm, ego, soul. So the concept of a soul or ego, you may have your preconceptions about that, but we're just going to sort of frame it from how we understand it. So an ego is effectively all your identifications to the body, the mind, maybe how you're feeling, you're thinking. It's the very like material world things. And these are the things that limit you, and they maybe generate fear, anger, maybe negative things in your world and perceptions and beliefs. But if you face those things, then you actually can transcend those limiting beliefs. And if you look at it as limiting beliefs, that's quite an easy model for you to understand. So if you're coming from a place where your beliefs are stagnant, then you are identified with the ego. You're incapable of change, and you may become a bit stagnant, and you may end up sort of being threatened or attacked by other egos threatening your beliefs and things like that. So taking that step back into that sort of more spiritual plane as a soul, you end up leaving room for growth, because you're not fully identified with that ego. You know you have one, but you're taking this more seat back, I'm the observer here, and I'm trying to work through those things.
I guess one of the easiest ways to understand the difference between what we're referring to as ego and soul is like the soul part of you is your being and your like essence and your truth, whereas the ego is like more of your doing, like, and I guess placing your worth on your doing. It's more external, more like physical, more desire, those kind of things, more fear. Oh, I had a really good idea, but now I can't remember what it was.
Don't worry.
It'll come
But
back to me.
yeah, so if you come into a relationship and you're like, you come in with your preconceptions and your pre-ideas, and we all do, but then you're incapable of sort of evolving or changing, then you're not going to be in this positive feedback loop of, we're both here to sort of become the best versions of ourselves. We're here to sort of grow and learn about the world and explore the world and experience the world and sort of show up and do our best. You don't come into the relationship with a growth mindset. You come in with potentially a victim mindset. You maybe are expecting things from the other person. You end up creating those sort of patterns and behaviors, maybe that you picked up from your parents or whatever. And you end up repeating sort of patterns and conditions that you've sort of accumulated throughout your life, and it's not good for you. It's not good for the relationship, and this is why most relationships after the sort of traditional honeymoon phase end up falling apart, because they end up just clashing ego on ego, belief on belief, and they never sort of find that you're trying to fit like these complex beliefs together, and you end up making compromise on compromise, belief on belief, condition on condition, boundary after boundary. You're not like, hang on a sec, let's take a step back. Let's like maybe take a more growth orientated. Why do we even need these beliefs to begin with? And obviously I recommend lots of books on spirituality, but it's using this as a vehicle in addition to your other spiritual practice like meditation or something like that. You have a relationship that is meant to contribute to your life. It's meant to sort of make the world a better place, but also your home a lovely place, a family, stuff like that.
Yeah, the couple points you made then that I really liked was the power of the intention that you have. Like, it's the same with initiating anything, and initiating a relationship is equally as powerful. It's like the intention you have going into it has ripples effects throughout, and like it's hard to build a good relationship on a bad intention. And the other one was, you mentioned two people with their patterns, and if you're in a pattern, like a negative pattern around fear, and you're like wrapped up in that and you can't take that back lens and that witness lens and see it, but you're fully just like always wrapped up in it, you will attract more of that pattern in the person. So for example, if you've developed patterns around like fear, you are likely going to attract someone that is fearful or makes you scared because you're used to that pattern reaction and that's something you're comfortable with. Like, yeah, the patterns is what you'll attract in another person as well.
Yeah, and you may have even heard someone talk about all their past relationships being exactly the same, but that's maybe because they were the exact same person attracting the exact same sort of person. So there's like that cliche that maybe it wasn't all the people that were the same, but maybe they were not changing in the way or growing through those, because if they maybe stuck out in a singular relationship, they would have worked through those things, and if they had that sort of spiritual partnership, they maybe would have transcended just that one thing that they keep butting into.
That's exactly why it's the perfect vehicle, because if you're everyone has their patterns, and say you're coming into a spiritual partnership with your own patterns, it would be more of a spiritual partnership because you're able to detach from your patterns, but obviously they're still there, something you're working on. It's likely you will attract someone that triggers your patterns, and that's why it's such a vehicle for growth, because that's inevitably going to happen when you're spending a lot of time with someone, and it gives you the perfect opportunity to almost like figure out what those patterns are, experience them being triggered, like sit with that energy and do process those things that need processing that like you may not have otherwise been able to if either you were like trapped in those patterns and you couldn't take that seat back and witness them, or you're not in that like growth mindset.
Yeah. So I'm going to go something a bit more practical now. So more talking about like how we end up showing up now and our strengths and our weaknesses, and how we sort of have learned to sort of maybe go along with that growth, but also lean into those masculine, feminine things. And maybe we have certain strengths and weaknesses that we end up day on day in, like day in, day out. We're going in, we have these preconceptions that we're already quite good at these things, and maybe not so good at others, and we sort of play to our strengths, and
Yeah.
that is also part of like how you are playing as a team. So like your strengths and your skills are like not you and them, it's sort of like where are you
Correct.
together.
Yeah.
Like, so where are you showing up together? Like which direction is the team going? What's the vision? A lot of like the vision would probably be down to like the masculine sort of leading the way, but obviously you can't do that without this feminine masculine synergy, if you will.
Definitely, yeah, and like playing to each other's strengths, all therefore together as a team makes you stronger.
Yeah.
You have more strengths collectively than you do individually, right?
Yeah, and you end up
If you play to them.
you end up nullifying the weaknesses. Like the weaknesses don't have
Often
to
they
show.
counteract, yeah.
Yeah. So in particular, like with a masculine essence, if I was speaking on like general strengths, but particularly like what we've learned recently, it's often you come to me for like decision making or a bit of clarity, wisdom. You maybe want to talk through something, and you'll find that super useful.
It gives me a lot of peace, yeah. Like even if I'm pretty sure of what the right decision in a situation is, it's really like helpful to lay the options out to you and just like, even if it's a second opinion, just confirming what I thought, or like totally giving you the choice because I'm open to any of the options, kind of thing.
Yeah.
It gives me a lot of peace knowing that like time and time again you've proven that you are a great decision maker. In many scenarios you've been a much better decision maker than me, so why would I not like lean on that strength of yours?
Yeah, and likewise I think you have lots of strengths in your way to sort of show up and care for, you know, everything and everyone. You're a very compassionate human being, and that's quite a healing effect that I think you have on everyone you meet, but particularly me and the relationship we're in. Yeah, and on that, the sort of the problem solving aspect, I know you're like really good at problem solving like in your day to day, but oftentimes it's like it is sometimes the masculine that does more of the problem solving, and you're like playing that muse role, you're sort of assisting in
more
that.
intuitive.
Yeah, for sure.
Less like logical and reasoning.
Yeah. Of course, everyone has reason and intuition. But
yeah. Everyone has a mixture of both, and you can tap into them, definitely. But yeah.
Yeah. And so some of the more practical things that we do, like maybe when an opportunity comes up. So we're often like reminding each other. So like in a certain situation, if a disturbance comes up, it'll be like, hey, by the way, it often doesn't happen. Weirdly, it almost never happens where you're both like really disturbed or you're both like going through something really challenging. It's always like one is there with like maybe a bit of like a higher ground, can see exactly what's going on.
The clarity, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, hang on, by the way, you're going through something, and like even that gentle reminder of this is what you're going through from my perspective, like
when you're in like
sort of snaps you out,
the eye of the storm and like in the weeds, sometimes it's really hard to even recognize what's happening, and you're like totally just being like controlled by these disturbances is what it feels like, and like overwhelmed with the emotions of it, I guess. And having someone to remind you that like, by the way, like you've done this before, you've processed things before, this is temporary, you aren't your disturbance, you're just experiencing it and witnessing it and holding space just to like be a stable, peaceful rock that like you can speak to, bounce off, almost as like this is an anchor point to reality when you're like going through this thing, is really, really valuable, definitely.
Yeah, and part of this this other concept is like, if you're mindful yourself and you're going through this self-transformation journey, you're detaching from your ego somewhat, you're dissolving those beliefs and conditions and limits that you have set on yourself previously, then it's quite easy for the untrained spiritually to be disturbed by someone else's disturbance. And so if you're able to like hold a level of presence and mindfulness for someone, which isn't often talked about in the sort of spiritual community, but when you're able to hold mindfulness not just for yourself but for people in the room, for people that are around you, like if you're disturbed and then I then become disturbed, I then become part of the problem.
And that doesn't always look like you enforcing that mindfulness and like telling someone to be mindful. It's more like, for example, if I was disturbed, just you not getting disturbed by whatever it is that's bothering me reminds me that like it's not, the world isn't imploding and we're not all falling apart, like it's just a me thing that I'm working on. It's like, it reminds me that reality is reality, everything is peaceful and calm. Clearly I just have something that I need to work on, and like you're a great point for me to like bounce things off, and you stay peaceful and calm, and that's very reassuring and helpful. It like brings more clarity to sometimes a confusing situation.
And to me, that's come from like years of my own personal growth. It's like being able to be present and loving and compassionate regardless of what's happening outside of me, and like recognizing, not taking anything you're saying personally, but just recognizing it for what it is like, that's not you.
Yeah.
That's just something that you may be experiencing right now, but I'm going to be present for you, and I'm going to be present regardless, and I'm not going to succumb to what you're going through. And that's how it sort of becomes this like never-ending feedback loop, because you're going through all these opportunities, you're doing your own growth, and you end up just becoming more present, more loving, more mindful, more spiritual, more of a vehicle. More opportunities come up, like maybe deeper, more recessed or repressed sort of things that end up coming up. You end up feeling, you know, greater things, or it becomes this like almost exponentially increasing journey, and it's pretty awesome. But yeah.
Sometimes it's kind of funny as well, like if I was deep in a disturbance and I came to Connor, like probably from a place of ego, because I'm like wrapped up in it, like almost looking for reassurance or a solution or an answer, or like sometimes sympathy, and you're just like this stoic solid rock, which from my perspective now, not in a disturbance, I'm like, that's exactly what is the best in that scenario. But it can be almost kind of frustrating when you're like looking for something from them, from a place of disturbance, but then as soon as you're out of those clouds, it's like, thank you so much for being that way. And like,
often it's almost disarming. So the ego is being disturbed, and like a good example for this is like an angry person. So imagine one of us right now is like really angry, and the other person is just compassionate towards you. They're chill. They're involved, and they care about
present.
you. They're just there. They're talking to you, and they're not letting your energy impact them. And it's almost like, why was I even angry in the first place? Like, what am I doing? Why am I angry? But if that person then became angry in response, or fearful, or like any sort of reaction that was negative in that situation, would have then started this negative.
It like compounds the negative.
So it's like, it's a pattern interrupt. It's like as soon as you're like positive in a negative thing, it just like the positive always wins out on that sort of situation, because presence is like a loving sort of essence. It's loving energy. Like being mindful is sort of counteracts any fear-based belief.
And if you can be loving and present in the face of, like, for example, an angry person, and like you can be so present that you can just be loving of their soul and loving of their innocence, and like look past the anger that they're presenting, that is so refreshing to that angry person. And it's like it like shakes you out of it, doesn't it?
And that skill also you end up applying to yourself as well. So like not only are you not responding to an angry person, but the next time maybe you feel anger, you're like, hang on a sec, like can't I show that same compassion, that same like self-love to myself, that same just presence, that awareness, that mindfulness, knowing that I'm not this person isn't that. Like I've been through the same thing personally, externally. It's like they're not actually that different in terms of situations. You're actually able to help anyone grow with your presence, and you're able to help you grow with your presence.
It's definitely a skill that like takes some time. Like it's definitely a skill I'm still working on. But yeah, it's a very powerful skill for sure.
What would you label the skill as? Mindfulness, presence? Like...
Definitely both of those. I like the idea of holding space for someone. I think that's part of it. It's like being present and like really seeing them and like totally being there, but holding a completely like unreactive, peaceful, mindful, loving frame. Very cool.
Amazing. Alright, cheers guys. I hope you enjoyed that video. Let me know if you enjoyed our special guest Sophie. It felt sort of conducive to bring her on, since we're talking about spiritual partnership, and makes sense to sort of discuss it as a partnership. So
feel free to ask any questions. We're happy to answer any more questions.
Leave stuff in the comments. Cheers guys. Peace.